Can you kind of talk about? My understanding is they haven't even tested the majority of children here in Cleveland, yet they still found 17% last year had elevated lead levels. Why aren't they testing the majority of children?
You want to take it, Ivanka? Sure. So there is a variety of reasons. We have a few overlapping reasons why kids aren't being tested, but part of it is that we haven't made it a priority. And the latest numbers we have are actually even higher. Up to a quarter of our kindergarteners are coming in with levels above what the CDC has recommended, and over 90% of incoming kindergarteners that were tested had some exposure to lead. So part of what we're doing here is saying, we no longer need to go kid by kid. We no longer need to wait for a kid to be poisoned. We don't want to use our kids as lead detectors. We need to go to the homes first and fix them.
And also, obviously, a lot of people don't know this. Cleveland has the highest child poverty rate in the country. I think 48.7% last year. So can you kind of talk about the connection between, I mean, frankly, like a lot of American cities, you're seeing gentrification going on, high poverty, and frankly, inaction when it comes, because a lot of these neighborhoods are poorer and minority.
Do you want to take it?
Well, we all know that we have many problems associated with poverty. And one of them significantly deals with the condition of the housing and the failure of the government, the failure of the community to prioritize those impacts by poverty, to go after poverty. It is there's no excuse for us to continue to allow for Cleveland to lead the pack of impoverished communities. So infant mortality, lead poisoning, and many other problems come from that. So inevitably, this discussion is about improving the conditions in which poor and minority families and children live in, and for us attacking the problem holistically with that way. But we know we have the crisis that we can go right now and stop this problem by going in and requiring a higher standard for our rental properties, and then requiring the private sector to give as much commitment to these issues that they do in many of the other major issues, such as conventions and conferences and Amazon headquarters approaches.
My name is Milo Corman, and I'm here with the Cleveland Democratic Socialists of America.
So one thing that stands out to me here is I guarantee you a lot of people watching have no idea that there's a lead issue in Cleveland. Probably they don't know there's one in Detroit. Probably they don't know there's one in Milwaukee, and the list goes on. Is that in part because of our national media? Is that in part because of people's kind of apathy to what's going on? How do we wake more people up? Because honestly, like lead, it might not kill you right away, but it will it will basically stunt your growth, your mind, all those things.
Yeah, I think to answer your question about why people don't know, so the cities you just mentioned are all these Midwestern Rust Belt cities that have experienced not the same amount of growth and development as maybe on the coasts. And because lead is a problem mostly in Cleveland from lead paint, which was banned in 1978, cities that haven't had a ton of development since then are still using the old housing stock. I think it's like 90% of housing stock in Cleveland or something like that is pre-1978. So those cities are most at risk. And then the other reason why people don't know about it is because the populations that are most affected by it and who suffer most from it are poor, are black, are the working class, and we don't cover that in our society. We cover the tragedies of the rich all the time, and for a poor kid growing up who already has so many other cards stacked against them with a racist criminal justice system and an underfunded education system is being poisoned from birth, and we just don't talk about that because of the populations who it's affecting. So I think that's how I would answer your question, is you can look at who it's targeting, and that's why we don't talk about it.
Right. And I wanted to ask you about Cleveland and Ohio in general, because it's not just lead. Everything is connected. So we're downtown. It's nice and pretty, but pretty gentrified, I would say. You've had a build-up in certain areas while the rest of the state has kind of been left for itself. Do you see gentrification as connected to this?
I do. I see specifically how this issue illustrates the way that cities will choose certain populations and areas to develop and others to underdevelop and leave without resources. And I think this is just emblematic of that, like many other things. You look at downtown, and a lot of money has poured in. The last time there was a movement like this in Cleveland, and anyone in Cleveland will know about this, but I know you have viewers from all over, was when the city council voted to give millions of dollars to Dan Gilbert to expand the Q Arena just down the street. And there was a mass movement of people, many of the same people we saw behind us right there, to do a petition drive just like this one to stop that. And eventually that movement was betrayed by its leaders under heavy pressure from government. And I think that is exactly the same thing we're talking about, where there's development that comes, but it comes to help Dan Gilbert, and it brings people downtown, and that money is great to spend here, but it doesn't get spent anywhere else in the city. And we leave large swaths of the city with no resources, no funding, and in some cases, no futures.
And lastly, you're with Democratic Socialists of America. I mean, there is a role of the National Democratic Party. Like, the only fundraising emails I ever see is on Trump, Russia, Stormy Daniels. I don't see anything. And honestly, forget like what's morally right. It's so politically easy. Like, this is how you attract working people in the Midwest. You fight for their issues, but it doesn't seem like it's either they don't care or they just are ignorant.
I think the abandonment by the Democratic Party of local politics in the last, I don't know how many years, the decades, has a big reason for why things are the way they are right now. And I got to say, I'm heartened to see that in recent years, it seems like that trend is reversing, that there are new waves of grassroots people, both electorally and non-electorally, working to change the system. And I'm very heartened to see that, but we're starting from a huge disadvantage. But we can't, it's the Democratic Party is active here in Cleveland. They control everything, and we are going to need them on this. Even if they're not with us yet, for this to work, for this to be enforced, we're going to need them. They're going to have to see the light. And it's on us to mobilize people and beat on their doors so they can't help but let us in.
One more. What specifically are you signing petitions for?
Yeah, so this petition, this is for an ordinance that would require landlords of pre-1978 housing to get their rental properties certified as lead safe before they can be rented out. Right now, the only lead enforcement comes after a child is poisoned. Then that triggers a whole bunch of things where the home must be remediated, but obviously that is too late. So this would say that any pre-1978 property, the burden is on the landlord now to certify it as lead safe.
And if it's not lead safe, they
face fines if they or they have to take it off the rental market.
Cool. Thanks, brother.
Thank you.
Appreciate it. Yeah.
My point here is national emergency. The damage to the environment doesn't matter. Drinking water, lead poisoned housing. It's the same. Polluted airs. This affects all our people's quality in their life. So babies are way more vulnerable. However, today you see the number 92. If you don't do anything, this can go up to 9,200 quickly and easily. So we really need people to be aware of that. Just because the government do not take this as a priority, and we should give up. Today now we have the action started. You can sign the petition. You can start volunteering. Just like any other good causes. Remember, your voice is not heard. That puts your life in jeopardy. However, you have to understand the city and the county, they do have their limits. So we do have to watch out some other factors which will affect the issue. And if we don't work on it, we don't tackle these obstacles, we will go nowhere. That means they will have 92 with way more zeros behind, and the city and the county will actually go perish with this whole environment. So people, please be aware, you have to participate no matter what.
So you actually are the first person I got in touch with this when I saw this alarming number, and now I'm even more alarmed that they're saying it's gone up since that study. Can you kind of talk about your fight over the years? Because it's not like you guys just started this today. You've been fighting for them to take this seriously about the lead problem for many years.
Yeah, this has been 3 years in the making. So we started off 3 years ago meeting, coalescing public, private, and community members to talk about this issue and to figure out what we could do as a solution. We brought in speakers that were national speakers that focused on lead. We brought in local speakers. We actually brought in the people from Toledo who had recently passed their own lead ordinance. We looked at the things that were going on in Rochester and in California, and so we actually had a plan. We took our plan, we molded it down to, we needed to make sure that we talked to all the city council members. So we talked to the city council members to see if they were on board. And then, so Jeff was one of the city council people at the time who decided that, so he was Councilman Johnson at the time, but he decided that he wanted to take on this issue. We asked him if he would work with legal aid in order to draft us some legislation. He drafted an ordinance, which was 99017, and we expected it to be heard. And what happened was a year went past. Council came to our meeting. They promised us it would be heard, and it was never heard. They never put it to the floor. So last year, we were sitting in a meeting, and everybody said, so what do we do now? And I said, we take it to the people. Let the people decide where this is going to go, because it's obvious that if we leave it up to council, it's not going to go anywhere. And so for me, at the same time last year, we talked about the $88 million that the city of Cleveland gave to Dan Gilbert to put a patio on the Q. And so my thing is...
Q is the arena where the Cavaliers...
Yeah. And so if the Q can get a deal, can the community get a deal? And so we are here because of the children. And as you saw the numbers today, since they made an announcement that they were forming a coalition, 92 children have been poisoned.
And that was only in like a month or two?
Yeah. And so we know that about 4 every day. And so with that rate, and we know that the cost of those children averages to about $1 million for each child. So it's $92 million of the cost associated with children that are lead poisoned across their lifespan. We have to do better than this. We're wasting money. We're wasting resources. The things that we're doing on planning meetings and planning summits, and instead of actually looking at what we all have already crafted and made it better, we made it into a bill. And now we're going to take it to the community and let the community decide.
And lastly, talk about the racial component here. I mean, obviously, Cleveland has the highest childhood poverty rate in the country, which is obviously not a good mark. And a lot of these communities where they have old housing stock, haven't changed anything, is African American.
Yeah. Well, Cleveland is about 54% African American. Total minority population is 60%. And so what we look at is when we look at the areas where predominantly African American and poor communities live, we have not only old housing stock, houses that were built before 1978, but we have housing stock that is in some cases irreparable. And in other cases, it can be repaired. But a lot of the community, because of poverty, they don't have the dollars to fix it. Most of these communities are living in rental properties. And so that is why we have asked landlords to step up. If you are a landlord, you are there because that is your business. And so because you are making money off of this, we need to make sure that you're ensuring that your places are lead safe before children and their families move in.
And one more. Like I said, is the public getting a little jilted as far as what is an emergency and what is not? Because all of this chatter about the border and Russia and all these things, I mean, you got children right now could be drinking poison.
So one of the things I posted actually this morning on Facebook, I said, it's amazing that the federal government, the state government, and local government don't know what the definition of an emergency is. So having a wall is not an emergency. Having a stadium built is not an emergency. Making sure that we protect young people whose lives will be changed for the rest of their lives, that is an emergency. So we need to understand what the definition of an emergency is, and if we don't, we need to elect new leaders.
Thank you very much. We'll be in touch.
Thank you.